And Caleb Campbell being selected by the Detroit Lions out of West Point may have been the feel-good story of the second day of the draft and maybe the entire draft.
My name's Caleb Campbell. I grew up in a small Texas town, Perryton, Texas, roughly a town of 8,000 people where sports were everything. Friday night lights, every night, every weekend, that's what I did. And I learned at a very young age that the quickest way to be accepted in life is it's through performance. It's easy to be accepted when you're scoring touchdowns on a Friday night. Now suddenly, because of that, performance was no longer something that I did or that I didn't do. Performance became my heartbeat. Performance became who I was or who I wasn't. And I carried that all throughout my life. And it tormented me. It really did torment me, knowing that the only time I was accepted in life was when I was actually performing well. And it tormented me to the point of I literally, I contemplated suicide often. And I didn't actually know what was happening at the time, but I hated my life. I was in a dark place. I was full of depression, and it took a toll on me over time. Shortly after high school, I went to the United States Military Academy at West Point, and I took that performance-driven mentality into West Point. And not only did I take that performance-driven mentality, but I took the anger and the control that came with it. In my younger years, I had this fear of rejection, this lie that really took hold of my heart that said that you're only accepted in life when you perform well in life. And because of that lie, it really produced a fear of rejection in my life, And I took that into West Point, and suddenly, whenever I felt the vulnerability of potentially being rejected in life, I used my go-to defense mechanism, which was anger. And I would have these sudden outbursts of anger that would ultimately enable me to grab hold of the situation, to control the situation anytime I was feeling vulnerable in life because of that fear of rejection. So I became this hard-nosed, anger-filled cadet athlete that, just lived from performance to performance and ultimately protecting myself at all costs. Going to West Point, I knew from the beginning that after graduation you had a 5-year service commitment to your country, fully aware of that. But as I went through West Point, I think I started my 6th game my freshman year. I became the starting linebacker at West Point, ultimately moved to a safety position. And by the end of my sophomore year, I am now the number 6 strong safety in all of Division I football. And it kind of happened overnight. I woke up one day and I realized that, oh my gosh, the potential of playing in the NFL, a childhood dream, a dream I've always had for myself since I was a little kid, was actually it could become a reality. But my sophomore year, at the end of my sophomore year, there was this new policy that was basically put into motion, put into effect from the Department of Defense that ultimately said, if you're good enough to play professional sports, you could play professional sports and also serve simultaneously. And that was the policy that kind of placed into effect. And that was the policy that I was aware of over the next 2 years of my life. So I go on and I play for 2 more seasons at West Point. I ended up, staying kind of as one of the most premier safeties in all of Division I football, all of college football, at large. And I ended up attending the actual 2008 NFL draft. I'm being featured on ESPN, on the NFL Network. I'm kind of the feature story of the draft, where I was ultimately selected, a childhood dream coming true. I was selected in the 2008 NFL draft in the 7th round by the Detroit Lions. So at this moment, I'm kind of on cloud 9. I don't know what's happening except that I just got drafted. I'm going to the NFL. I'm supposed to be serving in the military simultaneously. A lot of commotion, a lot of confusion, a lot of voices speaking into my life in this season. So I'm about to start training camp. It's the day before training camp. I'm sleeping in my hotel room. I know that later on that morning, I've got to get to the stadium because I have to sign my contract. That I just got drafted. I'm signing a 3-year deal with the Detroit Lions to play with the Lions. And suddenly, my phone rings and I get this call from my agent at the time. And he says, "Caleb, what's going on?" And I'm sleeping, man. Like, it's early. And he says, "Get to the stadium. Something's happening." And in my mind, I'm saying, "Am I cut already? Like, are you guys cutting me? I haven't even been on the field. I haven't even played a game. You're going to cut me already?" And I drive up to the stadium and they tell me to go upstairs to the conference room. And I walk upstairs to the conference room and the head coach is there, the recruiters are there, the general manager there. Anybody of any importance or significance for the organization, for the Detroit Lions, was around this conference room table. And I walk in and, in the middle of this table was this black phone, and on the other end of the phone was a government official. And he basically told me, he says, "Caleb, I'm sorry and I regret to inform you you that the policy that was placed into effect your sophomore year that was going to enable you to serve simultaneously while playing in the National Football League, well, it's been revoked. It's been, pulled out of the system, it's ripped up, and you are to report back to active duty immediately because you have now an active, you have a duty to fulfill. And I didn't really know what to make of it. I went back to West Point. I, began the process of serving out my time. And that's when they told me that you serve for 2 years. And after you serve for 2 years, if there's an opportunity for you to get back into the NFL, you can take that opportunity. So that's what I did. I served in the military for 2 years. And at the end of my 2 years, I got an offer from the Detroit Lions to come back and to try out to see if I can earn a spot on the roster. Yeah, I take 2 years off, and during these 2 years, I get in the best shape of my life because I know I'm going to get another opportunity to get back into the NFL, and I want to make sure I'm prepared. And I take these 2 years off, and as much as I want to deal with the fear, I don't know how to deal with the fear. So what do? I become super, an ultimate perfectionist. I become addicted to the weight room. I get my body in the best physical shape that I can ultimately get it into so that I can be prepared to get back into the league. And I get a shot to go back to the league and I'm in the best shape of my life, but I realize that the fear is still there. For me at this moment, there is this grave disconnect because I've heard the word of God, ever since I was young, and I knew that Jesus didn't come just to give us life, but he came to give us life to the fullest. And life to the fullest was the, complete opposite of the life that I was experiencing in this moment. And every time I didn't necessarily muster up that performance, that fear of rejection grabbed hold of me. It literally would take hold of my neck and it would choke the living life out of me to the point where, walking into the NFL stadium, every child's dream, anybody who ever plays football at a young age, they dream of walking into an NFL facility, and I'm walking into the NFL facility and I'm going straight to the bathroom because I'm about to throw up because I'm so nauseous. I'm so, stricken by fear. I'm having anxiety attacks. I can't breathe. I can't find my breath. And while I was actually at, off season with the Detroit Lions, nothing was going well. I was getting kicked off the field. I wasn't getting any playing time. Anytime I did get playing time, I would mess up. And, you're letting your teammates down. People are looking at you, with these glares, and you can't help but to be humiliated. And football is the very last thing that I ever wanted to do in this moment. And something's missing, So I bounce around from a few different teams, and I never land on an actual team that actually I feel at home with. I spent some time with Detroit, Indianapolis, and then I get to Kansas City. And when I got to Kansas City, I felt like things clicked for me. I felt like, I can kind of breathe here. There's a sense of peace here. And I'm like, finally, I found my home. I click with these guys. I get along with the guys. And everything was going, it was going well. And I remember at Kansas City, I have, the best week of practice in my life. And in the NFL, practice is everything. If you don't practice well, sayonara, buddy. See you later. Somebody else is coming to get your spot. And this is the first week in all of my days of playing in the NFL that I actually have an exceptional week of practice. I'm making plays. I've got teammates coming up. They're congratulating me. They're welcoming to the team. They're patting me on the helmet. Everything is going great. And we had a team meeting coming up where we're basically about to watch practice. And I'm kind of, I'm gleaming to go into a team meeting for the first time in my NFL career because I made some good plays and I knew undoubtedly those plays were going to be put on the big screen for the whole team to see, and they're going to applaud me and they're going to say, welcome to the team, we're so glad that you're here. I've got this dialogue going on inside of myself, and this I'm playing out this story on how it's going to play out, and I'm optimistic, I'm hopeful, so let's go to a team meeting. And I get into the team meeting and I'm getting excited because I know I'm on the field now, we're watching plays, and I know like a good play that I had just made is about to be up next on the film roll. And lo and behold, as the play transpired in front of our eyes, I kind of positioned myself, I'm like, okay, here it is. And at this time, I'll be honest, I'm hungry for a compliment. Somebody just give me a compliment, please. And I'm sitting there and I remember the coach stopping the film roll and he's kind of looking around to catch eyes on me. He's looking for me and he catches eyes with me and we lock eyes in that moment. And I'm kind of saying, okay, here it comes. And compliment is the last thing that had happened to me in that moment. Coach did everything, to throw me on the ground, kicking me in the shin, and spitting in my face almost, Basically, he didn't mention one thing that went right in that play. He picked it apart, and he told me everything that was going wrong. And it's not that I can't take negative or constructive criticism. It's not that I couldn't take that, but something was going on in my heart in this moment. And in that moment, it took every fiber of my being not to stand up and to scream, when is good enough actually good enough? And that's the question that haunted me day in and day out. It's, when can I rest in life? When can, my performance be good enough where I can just, just rest and to lower my guard once and for all, because I'm so sick of living from performance to performance, hoping to God that I just am accepted in life. And it plagued me. And at that moment, it was a breaking point for me. And I realized that it was time to give up performance and go find my heart. I realized that something detrimentally has gone wrong in my life, because my life stemmed from, this is who I am and this is who I know I need to be in life. So I would actually fluctuate from reprimanding myself to congratulating myself, because I was actually deluded into thinking I could save myself if I could just muster up the performance of a lifetime. And you would muster up that performance and things would be going great. You think everything is falling into place, and then boom, chaos hits and it's back to square one, and it's never enough. And that was in the moment that I realized, okay, something has gone wrong. I am missing something in life. I have to go figure this out, because I recognize that we can change scenarios. We can change, our external reality. We can go from city to city. But you know what? If my world on the inside of myself, if my heart doesn't change, nothing else is going to change. And at that moment, I actually decided that I was done with football. I decided to hang up my cleats, and now it was time to go find, who is Caleb Campbell? Who am I? Who am I as the man God created me to be? And I realized in this moment, the very last thing that I knew is who I was as a person. I was faced with a performance that I knew inevitably I could not muster up. There was no way that I was actually going to succeed in the National Football League, because I knew the fear was so tangible in my life. It was destroying my life in front of me. And whether you sense it or you don't sense this, there's this void that we're trying to fill. We're trying to fill this void. And what we do, and what I did, is I became a perfectionist. I became performance driven. And when that void, crept up on the inside of me, and I felt the vulnerability of that, I would have to numb out that voice, and I'd have to numb out and fill that void with alcohol, with sex, with drugs, with pornography, anything that I could get my hands on that would fill that void that I was so aware of. And the problem is that we are looking for meaning in life. We're looking for fulfillment in life, and this was me, right? And I'm looking for purpose in life, but when you don't know who you are, I've realized, when you don't know who you are and you're looking for all of these things in your life, you become burnt out. You become tired, and you're just kind of sitting in this place and you're saying, I quit. I quit all of this. I quit trying to be this person. I quit trying to measuring up. I just quit. And that's ultimately what happened to me in that moment when I was sitting in the locker room at the Kansas City Chiefs. I realized that I quit. I'm done trying to make this happen. I've got to go figure out what is going on in my heart. And that's ultimately when I found the church via social media in Fort Erie, Ontario, Life Lifting Church, Victory International. The church is called, and I moved. I stopped everything. I put all of my dreams, all of my aspirations, all of my ambitions, I put them on hold, and I said, you know what, nothing is going to change with my life until I deal with the matters of my heart. So I moved to Fort Erie, Ontario, or to Buffalo, New York, and I began serving in this church. I took for the last 2 years of my life, I took this process of being discipled, of learning what it looks like to have an intimate relationship with the Lord, learning what it looks like to, recognize that He protects me, that He provides for me, that He loves me, that He's my validation, that every one of my needs have been met. We as a church are so wrapped up living in the abundance of life. That's God's promise for each and every one of us. He came, like I said, to give us life, and not only life, but life to the fullest. He came to set the captives free. And that's me and that's you. And we are so wrapped up in living the abundance of life, but I came to this realization painfully that there's no abundant life without first an abundant death. And I took 2 years because more than anything, I wanted to find my life. Jesus says that he who wants to find his life first has to lose his life. And he says, if you want to follow him, pick up your cross, deny yourself, and pick up your cross and follow him. And why does Jesus say the prerequisite for following him is first denying yourself? I came to the realization that I was never made for myself. And I realized that, in the last 2 years, I have this resume of a life. I'm like, God, this is how I provide for myself. This is how I protect myself. This is how I find love for myself. And you're asking me to give it up? You're asking me to give it to you? This is how I find validation in this cold-hearted world. This is how I find acceptance. This is how I find meaning. And you're telling me I got to give it up? And he says, you have to. You have to. You have a dead heart, and you're entertaining your heart with things that possess no resurrectional power. And I can tell you, I wish I said I did this gracefully, but if anything, I did this kicking and screaming. I still wrestle with it. Every day I battle living for myself. I battle trying to live a life empowering me and neglecting everyone else around me, trying to find my success in life or trying to find my purpose in life at the cost of everyone else. And I realized that success at the expense of relationship is counterfeit. There is no resurrectional life without first a death. And it's the single-handedly the scariest but most liberating thing any one of us can experience. We recognize that Jesus says that I didn't say anything I didn't hear my Father say, and I don't do anything that I don't see my Father do. Jesus is the visible image of the invisible God, and I recognize that everything he says, all those red letters that are speaking directly to me when I open the Word of God, have my best interest at heart, have your best interest at heart. So when he says that for you to find your life, you first have to lose your life, he is saying that because he knows what we need. He knows what we desire. He knows even when we don't what we're looking for, and he has our best interest at heart. And it's in our willingness to obey and heed to those scriptures.